Welcome to Madison Square Garden. We're in 3 hours from now. We're going to have Devils-Rangers Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm Mark Hale with the great Larry Brooks here, who's going to be covering... How many Eastern Conference Finals will this be for you, Larry?
Well, this is the first Rangers since 1997, so actually it's the first in a while because the Devils haven't been there since 2003. So there's been a gap in our hockey history here.
Larry and I are back now, covering the series here. And Larry, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is let's talk about momentum in this series because the Rangers were the number one team all year in the Eastern Conference. Who has the momentum though going to the series? Because here's the Devils who are 14-4 in their last 18, but then you're the Rangers who are coming in off an emotional Game 7 victory. Is there a momentum factor in the series, especially going into a Game 1 tonight?
I don't think you can read momentum into this at all. I think it's accurate to say that the Devils have played the best hockey of any team, certainly in the East, of the two teams remaining in the East in the playoffs. And the Rangers have shown the ability to win huge games, winning a triple overtime game, tying a game with 7.6 seconds left in regulation, winning 2 Game 7s. But I think regardless, each series takes on a character of its own, and I don't think that either team has an edge going into this one off of what either has accomplished so far. I think the Devils have a huge amount of confidence off of their two series victories. One, they were down 3-2, won a Game 7 in overtime on the road. The other, they wiped out a heavily favored Flyers team in 5. So you've got that confidence building in them, and you've got the Rangers' confidence from having won 3 elimination games now in the first 2 rounds. So I think they both go in feeling very good about themselves.
Larry, how are the Rangers kind of physically right now? We've seen them play 2 7-game series, some emotional games, some overtime games. We know the stat that no team has ever, since the current playoff system started, no team has ever played 2 7-game series to open up the playoffs and then won that third round. How are they holding up physically?
Well, John Tortorella this morning dismissed the notion that the 2 7-game series should be any hindrance. He said it's a bunch of hooey. He didn't use the word hooey, but you know what? They've played such a physical style all year. That's what they're meant to do. That's the way they play. I think they're fine. They have they rely on 4 defensemen to get a lot of minutes, but they're not overburdened. They haven't been overburdened. You haven't seen their big 4 playing 30, 35 minutes a game. They're in the mid to upper 20s, which is a very which certainly can be accommodated by those guys. It's a tough team. I think the interesting thing of this series will be, and all series now in the NHL are grinds. There's just grinding battles all over the place. But the Devils play more of a forecheck style, and they leave a little bit more open ice than the Caps did, and even Ottawa did in the first round. So I think playing New Jersey, while it's going to put a lot of pressure on the Rangers in their own end, it may give their more creative guys and their speed guys a little bit more room to work in open ice, which they haven't had through 2 series. I think it could be a huge benefit for somebody like Derek Stepan, who isn't at his best when the game's played along the boards. Huge for Marian Gaborik, who really responded so well over the second half of the Washington series, and you want to get Brad Richards out in the open too with the puck. But the Devils have a lot of creative players. They have a lot of guys who can score. They're very good.
Larry, what about the quote-unquote matchup that everyone is going to look at in the series is the goaltenders. I use quote-unquote because they're not actually goaltenders. But when you look at the Brodeur-Lundqvist matchup, it's interesting because as you talked about, you have a guy who's won multiple Stanley Cups, who's considered one of the greatest of all time, and then you have another guy who hasn't done any of that, but is probably considered the better goalie right now. Is there a passing of the torch right now, and how do you view the goaltending matchup here?
I think it is fascinating. I think that's the exact word for it. It's fascinating. Henrik Lundqvist has outplayed Brodeur by a wide margin in their one-on-one matchups during regular seasons. There's no doubt about it. He has been the difference in most of the Rangers' victories over the Devils since the lockout, since he came over. But this year, Brodeur played some of his best games against the Rangers. There was a 1-0 shutout here at the Garden, in which it was a throwback to any year between 1994 and 2004, whatever you want to call Brodeur's peak. So I think Brodeur is highly motivated. Not that he wouldn't be anyway. It's almost foolish to talk about extra motivations these guys have. Both of these teams are 8 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup, 4 wins away from getting the chance to
But
play.
If
there is something else that a player needs to use, I think Brodeur's is to reclaim the throne in New York, and in New York, New Jersey, and I think it's Lundqvist's to claim it. And so I think it's going to be fascinating. I think the team that gets the best play from its goaltender will probably win the series, because I don't think either team will dominate territorially. I think it's the team that scores the biggest goals and the goaltender that makes the most mistakes that will contribute to the outcome.
Larry, if that's the kind of the matchup, but not necessarily the head-to-head matchup that people are going to key on, give me the matchup on the ice that you think is really critical to this series.
The critical matchup is really how the Ranger defense responds to the Devils' forechecking. It's a much harder forecheck than they've seen so far. The Devils may be the hardest forechecking team in the NHL, the style they play right now. And within the Devils' forwards against the Rangers' defense, there is going to be the matchup of Kovalchuk on right wing against, most of the time, Ryan McDonough on the left side, but a great deal of the time, Mark Stahl, who has come back pretty close to where he was when he was at his best before he had the concussion last year. So it's those two guys who will not alternate, but will split time against Kovalchuk, with McDonough getting most of it against Kovalchuk, and it's the Rangers in their own end against the Devils down low. It'll be how do they respond to Zach Parise on the forecheck? How do they respond against Travis Zajac in front? So that's a key matchup, and the Rangers are going to want to possess the puck in the defensive zone and put pressure on the Devils' defense. And interestingly enough, the Flyers were so unsuccessful at puck possession against New Jersey that it became one of the easier series of the playoffs so far. So it's both teams' defense against the other team's offense, and which team gets out into the open ice a little bit better, I think.
Before we get your prediction here for the series, Larry, what you covered the '94 Eastern Conference Finals, and it's kind of it's legendary around here. What do you remember from it?
What I remember about it is the high quality hockey that was played under such enormous pressure and with such high stakes. With a trip to the final, and everyone surmising that the winner of that series was going to win the cup, because those two teams that year were clearly the best two teams in the NHL. So there was a lot of drama in that series. There was drama involving Mike Keenan and benching Brian Leach and a number of guys in Game 4 at the Meadowlands. There were the Devils dominating Game 5 at the Garden. Messier. I mean, there was everything we remember about it, but what we sometimes overlook is just how spectacular the high stakes hockey was, and it'll be a stretch for these teams to match that, because those teams, again, clearly were the best two teams in the NHL that year. Had great players on both of those teams. If this series comes close, then it's a huge victory for hockey.
All right, Larry. Let's the game starts. Series starts in a few hours. What's your pick?
Well, I think there's so little to choose from in this series. I will take the coward's way out and go with the Rangers in 7. I think that they're evenly matched. I think they'll split the first 6 and then come here, and the Rangers have done it twice, and I see them doing it again.
All right, we'll see. Obviously, 8 o'clock tonight, right here in Madison Square Garden, is where the series will start. We're going to have more live video with Mike Vaccaro coming up in just a little bit, so check back on nypost.com for that. And you can obviously read Larry all series long.